Hey, welcome to Transform Your Workplace. This is the show where we talk about what's really happening at work, why it matters, and how leaders can build workplaces that people actually want to work for. Before we jump in to the conversation today, quick shout out to our sponsor, Xenium HR. Xenium helps growing businesses and nonprofits simplify the messy stuff with a complete HR and payroll solution. Everything from compliance and payroll to people strategy and day-to-day support, so leaders can stop firefighting and focus on building strong, healthy teams. All right, today's episode is a fun one because I'm joined by my colleague, Nae Hakala, an HR business partner here at Xenium. Nae brings a rare mix of empathy, real-world experience, and straight talk. We get into her career journey and what she learned managing creatives early on, why humanity matters in HR even as tech and AI accelerate, and how leaders can turn belonging from a fuzzy idea into an actual business strategy. If you care about leadership, culture, trust, and doing HR the human way, you're going to get a lot out of this conversation. All right, let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Nae Hakala. Nae, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Brandon.
I always love these conversations with my colleagues because I get to go deep on your background. And I know a little bit about your background, but like in prepping for this, I'm going deep. And these are different conversations than what I get to have with like other like authors and speakers. And that's a narrow subject, but I'm excited to hear about you. So you ready to get started?
Yes, absolutely. And I appreciate that so much because when I was like an emerging HR professional, I just wanted to hear people's like career journeys and like their
Yeah.
stories and like, their values and those kind of things. Those personal stories were really impactful for me to kind of see what it's actually like to be an HR practitioner.
Yeah.
So I love what we're doing. I think it's going to be fun today.
You've had an extensive history of working. Like you, back in your time at University of Idaho, I was like blown away to see that you were a station manager as a student, managing a staff of over 75 people. I think it's a huge responsibility. You must have been very mature in college versus I probably wasn't quite that. But what did that experience teach you about leadership, managing creative types at a radio station before you even entered the HR world?
Yeah, it sort of introduced me to my passion for leadership and the understanding that while I managed a staff of 75 people, they were DJs. They were volunteers that came. And so, like, I had to uphold FCC regulations, but it's also like this is an artist, like, this is a creative person. Authority wasn't a possibility. We had to really focus on, like, sort of empowering people, bringing them into the conversation, and really supporting, like, their agency and creativity while giving them, like, some support and structure. I think that it's helpful to have somebody kind of, wrangle everything into some structure we can all follow, but then exciting to see where people can take it if you let them.
When you were in that role, I'm sure you're learning so much on the fly, and hopefully you had some good mentors. But did that experience like enhance your college experience while you're educating yourself and working towards your degree? Like, how did those two things pair together?
Oh, absolutely. I tell all of my mentees, get involved. It will keep you there. And it's the same thing even in your workplace, in your organization. Get involved, join subcommittees, like show up to volunteer events. Just the more things that you do connect you to your coworkers and to your school or your environment. And building community, I think, is extremely important for the human experience. And you can just do that in so many aspects of life.
You spent years in high touch customer facing roles, places like Aveda and Elephant's Deli. How do you think those years in retail and hospitality shaped the empathetic approach that you take with employees today in your HR role?
I really appreciate your comment on empathy because I do really, really try to consult and lead from a place of empathy. I think that you interact with so many different people and they all come with their own perspectives, their own situation, even that day, like their own feelings. So you're really learning to live in the moment and meet people where they are, but it's also retail. So it's super fast paced. So it's balancing the fact that we're getting things done at an accelerated rate, but I am going to see the human in this experience and I'm going to connect with everybody I encounter. And so that's just been a huge value to me. It's like when you can connect with someone and build a little bit of trust, it just makes any other conversation easier. So, and the thing about my retail work was I was a retail manager and HR from corporate would come visit us. And I just thought they were the bee's knees. I thought these people were so cool. They would just show up in their like little suits and high heels. And they introduced me to the Myers-Briggs concept. And I was like, hold on. And this is like blew my mind, like the whole theory of organizational psychology. And there's a formula and you don't have to be like born with leadership skills. Like you can grow and develop them. And you know, the answers don't just have to be innate. Like you can really strengthen those skills. And the way that you do that is learning how people, you know, learn and react and exist in a social setting. And then you can speak to them in the way that makes sense for them. So that really like transformational leadership style is what drew me to eventually getting into HR.
I think there's so many parallels to the retail business versus like being in HR too, because you might be catching people at their worst day, you know, like people coming in buying a sandwich at Elephant's Deli and you're like maybe interacting with somebody who's like just having a terrible day and a little bit of kindness can go a long way, I think, in that situation. The same with HR, right? Like you may have to make tough decisions or be supporting somebody through a difficult situation. Like do you see parallels in that?
Yeah, absolutely. You can get so entrenched in the work that you're just like trying to do the task or like get the things done. And somebody's coming to you with a request for a leave of absence. You need to pause. Like, this person's at a pivotal moment in their life. This is a really hard thing to navigate. And so you just really need to see them and like see who they are and say, I'm so sorry you're going through this. I can't imagine what that's like. That must be really hard, but I'm here to support you. Let's talk about the things I can do for you. And hopefully I can make it just a little bit easier. I even think about that, like the worst part of my job. You ready for my complaint, Brandon?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
The worst part of my job is our RIFs, you know, reductions in force. Oh, and there's been so many this year, as you know, it's just like the economy, the way things are going, especially a lot of nonprofits, lost grant funding. And so I find that that is one of the most like painful situations to navigate. But I keep a couple of things in mind. And one of them is like, at least I get to lead this because I know I will do it with the utmost humanity and respect and empathy for these people. And I will try to make it as smooth as possible. Like it's hard news to hear, but maybe I can lessen that impact by having that compassionate edge. A lot of times those conversations are very cold and they're just very like, here's your final check and that's it. But I always want to take a minute to thank the person for what they've done for the organization and their time there. Even if they're exiting on not the best terms, it's not like they didn't work for you. They did a lot of work for you. They spent so many hours there. So I just feel like even though those are really hard times, and I always say like the other thing I do in my mind, like a little mental gymnastics, but I'm always like, hey, if the organization doesn't succeed, none of us have a job. So
right.
Unfortunately have to make some hard, moves, but I will do it for the greater good of the people. And I will just do it with the most respect and kindness I can bring to the situation.
At Elephants, you were really kind of building the recruiting plane while flying it. You implemented a new ATS system. You managed high volume of hiring in the industry known for turnover. So what was your secret to keeping the human element in the process while you're dealing with that much speed and volume, quite frankly?
Yeah. I mean, luckily I was such an HR nerd about things. Like I was just so into it. And so I was like really deeply studying recruiting and like the impacts of it. A really solid recruiting process will improve everything about your organization. It will improve the employee life cycle, the turnover rate, the culture, those kind of things. And so it was really fun to be able to build that. But in a high turnover organization or just industry, I should say, it feels like a never ending sort of thing. And it's easy to drop the humanity in that. And I read that the number one complaint candidates have is that they just never hear back. And if they had just heard a kind message of thank you but we've decided to go in a different direction, then at least it would give them some closure and really also just improve the organizational like reputation, you know? So I thought that that would be an approach to take, is to just like make sure that everybody, and I have these kind of hard and fast rules around recruiting that I personally subscribe to, which is, hey, if you've applied, I'm always going to get back to you and at least thank you for your application. If I talk to you, even if I phone screened you, I'm going to give you a call and thank you for your time because you took time to meet with me and talk to me. And especially if you've come in person, I owe you a conversation about what I thought you did great and why I went in a different direction. And I think that that feedback is so supportive and valuable that that's still my pipeline. Those people come back to me the next time I have a job opening because they know I really saw them and considered them and made space for them.
This is so refreshing, Nae, because I'm seeing so much noise around like all these cool AI tools to automate and streamline applicant tracking and just that whole experience where you're talking about like bringing the humanity into to that process. Like, are you concerned a little bit about how much AI and tech is automating some of what should be a human touch, like you're describing?
Absolutely. Yeah. People being automatically rejected from Paid Leave Oregon Francis site because I could be wrong, but I think they've got a robot just like scanning the paperwork. And if things aren't, exactly within their framework or their structure, they're just like automatic denial. Yeah. And so many employees are turned away. They're just like, oh, I guess I got denied. And I'm like, no, appeal. Like I'm trying to push like that might not have been a human looking at your application, and that's that second guessing we have to have all the time now, there's so many ways to feel on the other side of being an applicant, which is like, oh, did they reject me? Did they just go with somebody internally? Like what was the situation there? So it's really nice to talk to a human being that can give you a little bit more of an explanation of what's happened and where they are. I think honesty builds trust. Trust builds cultures. Like that is leadership right there. So for me, it's a little bit concerning. I think that AI has a lot of flaws. I think sometimes when we go with just like pure stats and input that we miss the human in things. And, there have been so many situations in which, well, if we just uploaded a system and said, hey, all the successful nurses at this organization have this profile, and then all of those nurses are women. And so AI goes, oh, okay, women are best at this job. And it just perpetuates that sort of, I always say it's just a robot. It doesn't know anything more than what you tell it to know. And so it doesn't have that humane piece, that critical thinking piece to go, but what if we added more voices to the situation? Like, what if we expanded this profile of the ideal employee and realized that there are many types of ideal employees?
When you were at Portland Public Schools, you had a focus on equity and you were tasked with cultivating a richly diverse and inclusionary workforce. Tell me about that. Like, what was that role like and what were some of your efforts?
That role was humbling.
Tell me more.
It was humbling because I learned so much in that role. That really sparked, if I didn't already have a lot of those personal values in me, it really put a name to a lot of the things that I was thinking. I learned a lot about my own culture and how it interacts with societal structures and how systems are set up in a way that if I can acknowledge how they are built, then I can better understand how others might be experiencing the system. That work really taught me that even though I am tasked with hiring a population of educators that more directly reflect the students that they're serving,
yeah,
and I may not fit those same criteria, that I can support this in my own way. And it's beyond like a term allyship, and it's more like acknowledgement of how dominant my culture is and how that can kind of swallow a lot of other experiences. And so really uplifting those communities and finding those people, and also just, again, also actually speaking as an ally and saying like, hey, Portland's great, I'm great, You love Portland, right? So trying to draw people there and say like, hey, here are all the things we're doing. Here are all the things we're building. These are the things we care about. These are our values. I mean, they spent a good amount of time and energy educating me. And it's really lent to now I'm like the co-director of EDI on the PERMA board,
Amazing.
um,
Yeah.
it was really from that work. Like we had book clubs. I learned so much and it was super uncomfortable regularly. Like growth is not comfortable, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I love that you leaned into it though, because it would be so easy to just say like, this doesn't feel good, I'm out.
It doesn't feel good sometimes, but now look at on the other side of it, or like as I continue that journey through it, I'm like, oh, discomfort's okay. This is how I get to the next level. This is how I grow. This is how I learn, And that's what I guess I mean by humbling. Like, it really was like, it was humbling, not humiliating.
What do you say to leaders who might be listening who haven't had that chance to be uncomfortable yet, have that conversation about equity and inclusion in the workplace, diversity, having these conversations or some sort of strategy or roadmap to implementing it inside their organization just because they're not educated enough? Like what kind of steps should they take?
I mean, first of all, what I would say to them is like completely understand. I know what it's like to feel like you don't have the answers, so maybe you should stay quiet. But I would invite someone to explore why they need the answers to begin with, why they need the answers in order to have the conversation. Because that is a cultural norm. That's white culture. And it's needing that perfectionism. It's a very either or mindset. And it has its merits, certainly, but it also has its drawbacks. And one of them is sometimes you're not seeing like a larger picture of people's experience because you're only seeing it from your side and it's benefiting you. So why would you explore that? But the fact is we do have a very strong culture and I can only speak from my perspective as a white leader. And so I have to see these things for what they are and understanding that perfectionism piece, I think strongly that individualism is a big deal in white culture. And it's, again, we founded our country with in an individual sort of mindset. And I think that's really cool. Absolutely has its merits, but the drawbacks are that we lose a sense of community sometimes and we lose a sense of belonging and pulling people in. And instead it's like a little bit more self-preservation, a bit more of like a self-reflective paradigm rather than a community oriented.
Got another question on that. So you describe yourself as an equity advocate and a builder of cultures. And when we talk about belonging in the workplace, it can sometimes feel like abstract and like, how do you operationalize this, inside your organization? So how do you turn belonging from this abstract feeling into an actual business strategy?
I think I have a couple things to say on that. The first one is, and this is just practical advice for leaders today, is like, just get away from the acronyms and say what you mean. It's when we're saying DEI, we're all automatically creating a divisive environment where people have opinions about what this means or that. But when you really speak to the value of it and what you're trying to say, which is inclusion and belonging, I think that really changes that conversation. And I think that it doesn't take broad strokes, huge initiatives. It takes everyday practices with a lens of respect and understanding and empathy and awareness, really. So it's those continued daily practices of understanding that are much bigger than some, big initiative, which can sometimes feel a little performative.
You spent a giant chunk of your career in talent acquisition before moving into this broader HR business partner role that you're in now. Was that difficult to pivot like that? Or do you feel like that extensive experience has actually served you well? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I think both are true. I think that recruiting, I have so much respect for recruiters, and I'm so glad I'm not one anymore at the same time because that is hard work.
Hard
It is
work, yeah.
hard work. The grind. On the other hand, it's to me the most fun part of HR. Like calling someone to tell them they have the job. Are you kidding
Yeah,
me?
that's the
Meeting
best.
people at the beginning of their life cycle, like, oh, everybody's so jazzed. They're ready to be onboarded. They're so happy to have gotten the job. Like those things are so fun for me that I was immediately drawn to it. In fact, my first internship, I was supposed to rotate through all the departments, but they started me in recruiting and they were just like, hey, do you want to just stay here? Yeah, I do. So I was just like a natural for it. I was drawn to it. And I'm curious about people. I'm naturally excited for them. And I want to help them get the job. I really do. I used to put people at ease in interviews by telling them, like, hey, I'm looking for reasons to hire you, not reasons not to hire you. So let's approach the conversation that way. And you would just see them
Oh,
disarm.
yeah.
And it was so cool.
Oh, that's so good. So I have to call this out because I had no idea you're working on a doctorate in business administration, and you started this in 2022 and you're really busy. And so I'm imagining you're just trying to do this like weekends and nights. And I admire that commitment. I've got kids. I can't do anything like that. I'm sure I could, but my life couldn't support that. So I admire you. What drove you to want to go that next level in terms of your knowledge, and how do you think this is going to show up in your day-to-day work with clients?
Yeah, I do. And I appreciate what you're saying about that sort of time commitment. And like, to be real, I don't have kids. I've got 2 cats and they're pretty low maintenance.
Fur babies. Yeah, little cats are not as high maintenance as dogs.
It makes it a little easier, but it is a big commitment. But to me, I'm studying something that helps me every day in my job. So it's sort of like a compatible hobby, if that makes sense. And I'm slowly chipping away at it. It's not like I'm a full-time student or anything like that. But the idea is, first of all, I mean, slightly selfishly, I wanted to like contribute to the canon and like, do that sort of thing. But I saw the value in these frameworks and like this evidence of like results, and this just sort of the research and the frameworks and the structures that I learn in my education, I get to in real time apply to my consulting. And so I see these things work, and I'm like I said, it almost goes back to the beginning. When I learned there was a formula for how to coach somebody, when I learned that you could follow a model and you didn't have to reinvent the wheel, it's called desk,
Yeah,
and it's like,
right.
that really blew my mind. And I continued, I guess, interest in that, where I'm like, hey, you don't even have to take my word for it. Like, here's evidence-based research. Here's philosophies of leadership. Here are ways you can go about things. And the interesting thing about leadership and about human resources is there isn't one right answer to anything. I always tell young professionals, if you're a black and white thinker, this isn't the job for you. You're going to live in the gray all the time.
So much.
There's never a completely right answer. It's weighing risks, it's weighing opportunities, and it's finding a path forward that aligns with your own values. And so that is really gray sometimes.
The workplace has changed so much over the last 5 years. I mean, definitely post-pandemic, but the last 10 years have been wild. I've worked in this industry for 17 years and I've seen a lot of change. What are some of the things that you find the modern workforce asking for today that they weren't asking for pre-pandemic?
I think that's interesting. And it's not even only just pre-pandemic, it's also like a generational shift.
Yeah, that's
as
a good
well.
call out.
And so we're seeing people requiring a lot more like trust and autonomy and flexibility. And it's really about empowering people to be their best instead of like pushing or forcing or even micromanaging. It's really just about supporting those staffs. And I see that requests come up a lot. And I also see a real need for like support around belonging. And people have been so disconnected. If I were to explain my job to a small child, I would say email, Zoom, email, Zoom.
Yeah.
Like, that's basically it, right? And so that's, while I am constantly communicating, it doesn't always feel like a lot of like human interaction. So for me, it's really important to take that time and get to know who I'm working with and just take a couple of minutes to see them as a whole person and see them as like having a whole life. And then working together just becomes so much easier because they feel heard, I see them. And so when we're working together, even on hard things, we have this foundation to work from. which I think is a huge help. So I just try to say, don't forget to connect with people. The younger generation, they say, has a hard time with eye contact. I'm no sociologist, I can't say, but that is something that we got as millennials, was a lot of in-person interaction. We learned how to do a networking event. We learned how to hand out our business card and do our elevator pitch. And this is just a whole different thing now. And to not feel like awash in a sea of 500 applications can be difficult. But just treating people with respect and individuality, and fostering their development, a genuine interest in supporting people, really allows that trusting relationship to drive your conversations.
Let's talk about your work a little bit more at Xenium. You went from internal HR roles to now being external, working for multiple organizations, different cultures, different sizes, different industries. What's the biggest mental shift that you had to make when you're juggling different cultures, different personalities, different handbooks and policies, different crises all at once, and you're juggling all that? How does that?
The interesting thing about consulting is it is very feast and famine. It feels like sometimes everything's happening at once,
Yeah,
and
right.
other times I'm like, oh, what am I up to today? So it's interesting because you really need to learn the flexibility of meeting organizations where they are. There are cultures to consider, there are policies to consider, there are also just budgets to consider. There are all these things that go into the decision making process at the strategic level. And so it's really fun to get to see the different perspectives and learn to be flexible. And that's really what consulting has been for me, is learning to flex to, how do I best support you in your organization? I guarantee that you as a leader have the answers. Let me coach you to them, because I think that when I empower you to make a decision, then we can all feel confident that you've made all the considerations. So I tell people, what is my job? My job is to explain the options, to talk you through the risks, and then to support whatever decision you make. And that's how I do it. And even if they make a decision maybe I wouldn't have, I'm still going to support them, because I know that they know enough and care enough about their organization that they're making it based on good judgment. And so I just approach these relationships with my clients with the utmost respect.
You work with a lot of small businesses and nonprofits. I think of all the business partners, don't you work with the most nonprofits?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's my
I
jam.
know yeah, values alignment, you're mission driven, and these organizations often have very incredible missions, limited resources. So what's your approach in trying to maximize the impact you can make, knowing that they have limited resources?
The biggest struggle I see with nonprofits is it's sort of this urgency, this immediate need.
Yeah.
And what I try to add to the conversation is that bigger picture, that, okay, if we make this choice right now, in 6 months from now, how is it going to feel? In a year from now, how is it going to feel? When we set a precedent this way, are we willing to do this again? And it's really easy to just sort of quick fix, maybe we brush under the rug during the busy season or what have you. That happens a lot. And it's just the thought of building strong foundations and structures that will serve you. What I hope is that I empower leaders to eventually make decisions where they're not even needing to call me about these things. And I know that might put me out of a job, but I really I appreciate just the different ways that we can build their skills and empower them to be the best support for their teams. And I know that I will always be valuable as a neutral person, and I tell my clients this all the time, my whole job is to make you look good. I'm literally here to support you. This is what the work we're doing. So I am never going to tell you something that's not in your best interest. I want you to succeed and I want your organization to thrive. And that's what I'm here to help with.
There's a few reasons businesses and nonprofits come to Xenium for support, and it's likely due to they can't get out of the day-to-day grind because they're just, there's too much to do from a people standpoint, and they need help.
Oh yeah.
They have knowledge gaps, skills gap in the HR space, or they just have structure problems. So when you inherit a client, a new client that maybe was just came on board, or maybe you're meeting for the first time, how do you help them kind of lift above like where they're at and help them map out a plan, let's say over 12 months or something, to actually strategize instead of like, let's get out of the firefighting for 1 second and actually map out a plan that's going to make a lasting impact? What's your approach to that?
Well, I think first of all, when people come to Xenium, they're already there where they see the need, you know? They're like, I need some help. But usually nobody's just, it's very rare that a client comes here and they're just like, I don't know, I was looking for a new payroll provider. I don't know what to say. It's usually like, hey, everything's on fire. I need a lot of
It
help quick.
happened,
You know?
incident. Yeah, right.
Yeah, like things have exploded. We lost our executive director. Something massive has happened. I really appreciate that, and I support that need to strategize for longer term. And usually, and this is honestly, this is one of my favorite parts about my job as a business partner is like helping build those foundational structures that we will constantly reference throughout the rest of our work. You know what I mean? So whether it's a handbook or job descriptions, like we're going to use these in everything we do. So when we build these incredible foundations, and our handbooks, just they're not just legally reviewed, they're thoughtful, they're human focused, and they're beautiful too. So I'm always like really proud of the product. And I always encourage my clients to start with a handbook, because if we can get that under our belts, we can constantly reference back to it, and we can say, hey, we developed all of these policies based on your values. And so again, we can adhere to these policies, and this will make sense for our decision making.
To wrap up our conversation, I found something on your LinkedIn summary that I wanted to pull through into this conversation. So you said that you believe results drive business, but also that attitude can be one's best asset. So for leaders listening who are trying to balance that drive for hard results with a human-centered culture, what's your best piece of advice for them?
I think it's not even a personal opinion, because statistics will support me here. But when you have happy, supported employees, they will perform for you. Like your job is just to support them. You don't even need to drive the results. You just support, and they will do all of that. When I'm coaching new managers, I always think about when somebody's calling you, or when you're calling out to somebody to come in on their day off, and you're asking them to, come in for the shift that they weren't scheduled for. Think about how they're going to respond if they don't like you, if they don't feel valued. They're not picking up their phone on that day off. But if they feel like, if they like you, if they care about you, if you have supported them, oh, I'm picking up that phone. For my boss right now, I would pick up the phone for Miss Nicole, shout out. Like I would absolutely pick up the phone for her, because she's been there for me so much, and we've just like built that real relationship. And because of that, I care. And I also just like believe in the integrity of people. I always I had a mentor tell me everyone's always doing their best. And it's just like, I thought it was such great advice, because if you approach things from that perspective, you realize that like people want to show up for you. If you just like give them that space to do so, you can really encourage a lot of results. Your business will grow. Those happy employees, they're not looking for another job. Turnover is your biggest expense. And so to avoid the cost of recruiting, to the cost of onboarding, the cost of retraining somebody, all of those things, because you just supported the employees you had, wow, that's a strategy for success.
So well said, Nae. I love it. I'm glad we ended there. Thank you for coming on. Where's the best place if people want to like connect with you and hear more of your insights? I know you're pretty active on LinkedIn, so maybe is that the best place to reach out?
LinkedIn is great. I also just want a quick plug for the Portland Human Resources Management Association. I think it's a wonderful organization that I'm super happy to be a part of and a leader in. And at any networking event, I always say like, hit me up on LinkedIn. I will save you a seat at my table. I would love to have you there. I just want to build this community together and really encourage this in-person fostering of the community. So please do reach out. I'm happy to support anyone in their HR journey.
Nae, thanks for coming on. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in for today's episode of Transform Your Workplace. The content on this show is strictly for general information and educational purposes only, so that you can go transform your workplace in a positive way. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on the show are the guest's own and don't represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of either Xenium HR, the sponsor of the show, or me, the host, Brandon Laws. Additionally, Xenium HR or myself, Brandon Laws, doesn't endorse any guest, their business, or any organization they represent, so discretion is advised. We encourage you to work with a trusted advisor to find a custom approach that fits your organization's needs. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode.